Hey everybody, welcome back to the Paramotor podcast. This is a very special episode because I flew all the way from El Paso, Texas to Savannah, Georgia, but we're currently in
Rincon, Georgia.
Rincon, Georgia, where I get to meet with Pierce Osborne, the man behind Off-Grid Aviation, who not only designed the greatest throttle in the world of paramotoring, but he also happens to be an incredible firearms designer. Is that right?
That's true.
Wow.
I don't know if I would say incredible, but but it is something I do.
From everything that I've seen, you seem like that you're creating firearms from out of Call of Duty, I hope that's a compliment because I mean it as the coolest thing possible.
You want it to go the other way. You want your guns to get into Call of Duty, not the other way around.
I can only imagine it's a matter of time before your weapons are featured in Call of Duty.
We can hope.
Yeah. So before we dive into firearms and paramotoring, I want to kind of introduce you to the people who watch the Paramotor podcast. Your name is Pierce Osborne, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so you're not actually from Georgia.
No, I'm from New Jersey. No, so my journey went from New Jersey to Pennsylvania to the other side of Georgia to this side of Georgia.
Okay. So growing up in Jersey, you were only down the street from that guy, I think he's a big name in paramotoring, Thomas Gutt?
Yeah,
Thomas
something
Gutt?
like that. Yeah, so me and Tucker obviously didn't know each other.
Right.
But yeah, we grew up, the next town over from each other.
Wow.
But yeah, never knew each other, never crossed paths.
Is it just in the water there to, at some point in your life, get into flying butt fans and...
Yeah, New Jersey doesn't have the best reputation for, churning out good people, but hopefully at least two of them came out.
If you're from New Jersey, I'm sorry. He has
if you're
every
from
right
New Jersey,
to say...
you already know. When they make the Jersey Shore television show,
your reputation...
that just sunk the whole state. Because we were holding on to hope for so long that we're gonna recover from this. People will respect us one day. Yeah. And then Jersey Shore comes out, and I was in college at the time, in Pennsylvania. Yeah. I'm like, I have to sever my ties from New Jersey.
And whenever anybody asks you, no, you're from here. You're right from this little town outside of Savannah, Georgia.
Yeah, and that's kind of the problem with that move to Pennsylvania. Yeah. Because now I live in Georgia, so people ask me, oh, where are you from? I mean, I'm from New Jersey. Like
the Northeast.
I was a child in New Jersey, but I was an adult in Pennsylvania.
Right. You grew up kind of in the woods, right?
So we grew up very close to the Jersey Shore.
Oh.
Yeah, we were only 20 minutes from the Jersey Shore.
Yeah.
So I wasn't on the beach, but we were just a little bit inland from the beach. But it was a 20-minute drive to actually get to the beach. So we were kind of on the Jersey Shore.
You didn't find paramotoring until after you left Jersey?
I knew about paramotoring for a long time.
Yeah.
I just never had the money to do it. So I never got into it until I lived in Georgia. So here's where my story is going to differ from what seems like everybody else in the industry.
Yeah.
So it seems like everybody you talk to is like, I always had a passion for aviation. I always wanted to be a pilot, and then I found paramotoring. Not really. I never really had this deep interest in aviation. I thought paramotoring seemed like a really high adrenaline sport, which it's not.
No.
But it seems like it would be.
Yeah.
So I got into it because I thought it was a cool thing to do, and it looked like a lot of fun.
Right.
Which it is. It's just not a high adrenaline sport.
It's slow and scenic and almost always uneventful.
Like 99.9% is uneventful.
Right. Okay, so Pennsylvania. So what were your interests? You ended up going to school. You're a former service member. You're a veteran.
Yep, former combat engineer. My interest...
11 Bravo.
12 Bravo.
12 Bravo, because 11
Bravo.
Bravo is infantry. 12
right.
Bravo.
So here's the thing with asking people what they did in the military.
Yeah.
Why does everybody give you the code? Like, oh, what did you do in the military?
I
was an 86 Delta.
I was
like,
a 68 whiskey.
What's that? Yeah. All right. Can you just say what it actually is?
Yeah.
I was a combat engineer.
So you were a combat engineer in the Army. Why weren't you an officer if you went to...
I went to Penn State.
Penn State.
So I joined the Army before I actually finished college.
Yeah.
So I wasn't eligible. And then when I was eligible after I actually got my degree, that seemed like a bad job and I didn't want to do it. Who wants to be in charge of people?
So you went to the military first and then got your degree?
Half and half. I started my degree, I joined the Army, and then I finished my degree.
And you would have needed your degree completed to become an officer in the military?
Which I could have done after I got my degree.
But you just wanted...
But I looked at the officers and looked at what they did for a living, and it just looked awful.
You were telling me in the car this morning that you used to carry the M249, right?
For a very short time.
Yeah, that thing's heavy.
It is heavy.
During my tour in Afghanistan, all I had to carry was a 1911, I think. The Beretta, is that right?
I was going to, you carried a 1911? Yeah, the Beretta, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, the M9.
We'll get into firearms, more specifically like AR-15s and designing them. We were here last night when you gave me the grand tour of this incredible shop that you've moved to.
Thank
You showed me the original place where it all started over at your home, about 30 minutes down the road.
Previous home base, yep.
Right. And it all started out of your garage. How did you get into engineering?
I studied mechanical engineering.
Okay.
And I learned most of the CAD work, which is computer-aided design, in college.
Right.
But I didn't really get to learn it until I got on the job. But even before that,
Right.
I wanted to be a weapon designer.
You did? When did that start? When did you want to be?
Forever. I always wanted to.
As a kid?
Yeah, even as a kid.
Did you draw?
We used to take our history books in school, and we used to doodle guns in inappropriate places in the book. So you'd have like some random like hippie march, and then you add guns to all these people.
Yeah.
So we would do that way back in the day. So I was always interested in like guns and weapon development. So I knew I wanted to do that. And how do you do that? Because there's not like, oh, well, you could be a gunsmith, but gunsmithing isn't really weapon design the way that we do it now. Mechanical engineering is a better path to get into weapon design.
Right.
But so in school, you're not learning about guns, but you do it on your own at home.
Yeah, you're learning that aspect of it.
That PCC behind me.
Gosh,
so that's
sexy.
Yeah, so that is my making. That was my big project.
Right.
And it was my first entire weapon assembly that I got to develop the whole thing.
You made the majority of what I'm seeing right there?
Yeah, the stuff that's not like a generic like AR-15 part, because it uses a lot of AR-15 parts, I designed that.
Can I hold it for a little bit of the podcast?
Sure, we'll let you shoot it later if you want to.
Yes, I would love to. Okay, this thing is so freaking cool. Okay, no flagging anybody.
That's right.
I feel so cool. Dude, this thing is so freaking awesome. Okay, but what I'm holding here is not a typical AR-15. This is a PCC and it shoots a 9mm round.
Right.
Wow!
The general term is PCC, so pistol caliber carbine. Some people call them subguns.
Pistol caliber carbine.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, some people call them subguns because submachine gun would be like the full auto version of that. My coined term that everybody brings up is I did a YouTube clip from SHOT Show when we launched it.
This is a big convention?
Yeah, it's a big convention where generally manufacturers show off the new products. I called it an AR-shaped object.
Right.
Because it is generally AR-15 shaped.
What does AR stand for?
Armalite.
Armalite. It's not assault rifle as many people?
It's not assault rifle.
Okay.
Those were the original people who made AR-15s.
You and I had a conversation about me purchasing a rifle for home defense. I've got a house with 4 kids in it. I want to make sure that my shot lands where it intends to go, right? I will get increased accuracy with a rifle over a handgun.
You have more points of contact.
Okay.
So like a handgun, you have one thing that you can hold on to, and that's obviously the grip. With a rifle, you have your grip, you have something braced against your shoulder, and you have a foregrip. So you just inherently have a lot more stability with a rifle than you do a pistol.
How much of the accuracy is improved because where the iron sight, for example, is extended further down the barrel? Does that increase accuracy?
Yeah, the further your sight radius is on a rifle, that does increase the accuracy.
Right.
But even if you just have a pistol, even with the short sight radius, you're still going to get a lot more accuracy and range and effective.
But it's probably easier to line them up when you have a longer one.
So yes, you can line up the sights, but it's really about keeping those sights lined up. So like on a pistol, because you only have one point of contact, you're kind of doing this.
Right.
But with a rifle, the fact that you have so many points of contact, you get to keep them lined up better. Therefore, you're holding it steadier. You have more effective range, even if, like this is a 9mm versus a 9mm pistol. This is going to have a lot more range just because you can hold it steadier. And you will get slightly more more velocity out of a rifle.
Some more oomph. When it comes to the velocity, the gunpowder is its fuel, powering it through. By the time it reaches the end of the barrel, has it already burnt up all of the fuel?
No, there'll still
because
be
you think of like
some.
when you hear it, it's just a pow, but when you slow time down, it's still burning. It's burning its way all the way out like a rocket. Just
You're going to get 3 times the velocity on a traditional rifle round than you are a pistol.
so you take the same round. I shoot it through here. I can get triple the velocity out of this as opposed to just a little handgun.
No, we're getting in the weeds a little bit. I'm talking same caliber rifle versus same caliber pistol. Rifles shoot a much different bullet than a pistol, and rifles will have like 3 times the velocity of a PCC or a pistol.
Okay.
So now we're gonna get even more complicated. There's a lot of different types of
Let's do
gunpowders. Pistol gunpowder is different than rifle gunpowder.
What do you mean?
Like it's a different grain size, and there's all different brands. But traditionally speaking, in general, pistol powder is meant to be shot out of a pistol, and you want to get all that oomph
Out.
in a very short barrel because they're designed for pistols.
Right. Okay.
So you'll get increased velocity with a longer barrel, but it's not as dramatic as you get with a traditional rifle round.
Okay.
Because traditional rifle rounds are made to burn in a very long barrel, whereas pistol rounds has very fast burning powder because it needs to get up to pressure very quickly,
Or else it's
because you
wasted.
only have like a 4-inch barrel, sometimes a 2-inch barrel to get some velocity.
Right.
Whereas rifles are generally around 16 inches or longer. Your 5.56 that you shot in the Army,
Yeah.
that was meant to shoot in a 20-inch barrel. And we have been shortening that barrel progressively over
Like
the
the
years. Like you
M4.
probably had a 14.5-inch barrel on yours. We go way shorter nowadays. Like we get 10.5-inch barrels. In some cases, we do 7-inch barrels.
What's this?
So that's an 8.5-inch barrel with a 9-inch suppressor welded on the end of it. So it still gives me that over 16-inch barrel length.
Yeah.
So that I don't have to pay 2 tax stamps on that gun.
Because you made it into one piece.
Right, because I made it into one piece.
That's really creative.
And anything fun, you have to pay the ATF $200. So the suppressor that's on the end of it, I had to buy it and also pay them $200. If I want to make a rifle with a barrel that's less than 16 inches, I have to pay the ATF $200.
I'm gonna have to pay them $200 to put this suppressor on my firearm.
Yep.
Okay. Well, it seems worth it to me.
So for me, I wanted that gun to be a 1 tax stamp gun.
Right.
So I welded the suppressor on a short barrel. So it permanently attached the suppressor to the barrel, meaning that barrel is now over 16 inches long, and now I can put it on a rifle.
When it comes to home defense, might this be ideal? Because you're not like, oh, someone's kicking in my door, I better get my earplugs real quick.
If you use a suppressor or a short-barreled rifle, it doesn't look as good in court that you have those guns.
You've already got a black gun.
I know.
That's scary. No, I'm sorry. Okay.
No, it's true. So often people will say, like, for home defense, use a fairly traditional type of gun because it doesn't...
Just for the legal battle?
Just for the legal battle.
Holy cow.
Yeah. No, that's a serious thing you have to think about is you don't necessarily want something
I don't want to be thinking about all that crap when I'm thinking of protecting my family.
Yep.
That's a little bit silly. What if you get one of those home defense insurance companies? Have you heard of those?
Yeah, I've heard of those. Like the concealed carry insurance.
Could they hash it out for me if I get like super modded freaking gun?
They could, but I think you should think of self-defense insurance as an absolute last chance. You should do the work up front to not put yourself in the position to need them.
So, suppressor may not be the best option.
You may not want them for home defense.
Just go and get my Walmart shotgun if I want it to be a straight shooter.
That's what the lawyers would tell you. That's way more functional to use a suppressor in a house.
Yeah.
Because have you ever shot a gun inside?
It's loud
With
as hell.
no hearing protection, it will wreck your brain.
The sound alone can be very disorienting.
And permanently damage your ears.
Right. So you would think that in court you would say, Your Honor, I built this weapon so that if I ever needed to defend my family, I wouldn't destroy my eardrums.
Yeah, and that makes sense. That makes sense that you would do that.
But it might not work.
But what I'm saying is we have to live in the reality of how things appear, and you just have to be careful getting a gun that is too tactical for self-protection.
Is this a good home defense weapon, or would a traditional 5.56 AR-15 be better? What do you think?
Okay, so the problem is you already told me that you want an AR-15.
I want both.
So
I want them both.
I know you're looking at an excuse to get an AR-15.
Yeah.
So just like take the square footage of your house, count the number of entryways, and just do whatever math you need to do to buy an AR-15.
Okay, just make it work for me.
Just make it work until you need an AR-15.
If I was to put sights on the intruder, God forbid I miss my shot, it could put a little one in the line of fire. That's a terrifying concept. But one of the things that can be done is have a round that might fragment when it hits drywall.
Like if you live in an apartment complex.
Yeah.
Okay, well, left and right walls, there's people living in there, and I don't know where those people could be.
Yeah.
We live, out in the boonies, and we have a lot of space between, our house and our neighbor's house.
Right.
So, like, we're not necessarily as worried about over-penetration here.
Mm-hmm.
Traditional bullets, they will fragment when they hit stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Your slower-moving bullets will actually hold their shape a little bit better, but they will lose that momentum. They make frangible ammo for just about everything now.
Frangible?
Frangible is like a compressed, it's like dust that they compress hard into the shape of a bullet.
Huh.
And if that hits anything, it just explodes into powder.
If it hits the body, before the drywall, if it hits your intruder, it'll mess them up.
Yeah, and it won't go through them.
Okay.
And same thing with like a wall. It'll hit a wall and then it'll disintegrate into powder after it goes through the wall. So, and you might, in your situation, depending on your house layout, like you might want to look at the less lethal options, like beanbag rounds for a shotgun instead of an actual lethal round, just depending on what your home scenario is.
Nah. Do you know any of the history of like when firearms were originally developed?
It's one of those things that it's not just like there were swords, and now we have guns. It was kind of a slow progression because it started with the invention of gunpowder.
Okay.
So they would take like bamboo and wood that was hollow, and you would make essentially little cannons, little cannons and explosives. So I guess technically, I think fireworks predate firearms. But they figured out that, oh wait, we could make this launch a thing. So you would have like old school little like wooden cannons.
With a walnut packed inside?
Yeah, probably. And it's just slow refinement over time. As metallurgy gets better, you start to see like brass barrels. And
I just learned that word, metallurgy, in the last podcast I did with the SpaceX employee. He said metallurgy. And I was like, wow, these are people who just know metals, right?
So I really liked your podcast with the SpaceX guy, because the firearms industry steals all of their materials from aerospace. Aerospace has all the money behind it. They do all like that upfront development, and then the firearms industry comes in and steals it.
Wow.
So like all the materials he was talking about, I'm like, yep, we use that for that. Yep, we use that for that.
Wow. Okay, so my question is, what is the greatest thing that you think contributed to the modern day firearm?
So smokeless powder and the mini ball.
The mini ball.
Both of those things, old inventions.
Yeah.
But they are what makes modern firearms actually usable. They're what makes semi-auto firearms usable. That was the revolution, and there is not as much advancement in the firearms industry as people would think. Like, we're still using gunpowder. We're still using.
Well, they look so freaking modern.
It's all refinement.
Yeah.
Like, the most accurate rifles of today. Like, if you're shooting some 6mm Creedmoor.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, it operates the same as that black powder we got hanging on the wall.
Oh yeah. That's what I would have suspected you would say. Maybe adding the element of that spin to increase accuracy, or some sort of gas blow-off valve or something that happens in this sick-looking PCC.
So rifling predates both smokeless powder and the mini ball.
Oh, wow.
So they were rifling barrels a very, very long time ago, but they were generally using round balls.
Right.
So they were very hard to load because you needed a really tight fit for the actual ball to get a spin on it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until you made like a conical shaped bullet that can deform into the rifling that gives it that really good stabilization.
Right.
That's how modern bullets work.
Okay.
Except now we aren't packing it in from the muzzle. Now we're actually swaging it in from the back.
Okay.
The back of the barrel.
I want to really dive into the firearm design, but at some point you thought you were going to make the world's greatest paramotor throttle, which you did accomplish. How did you get into paramotoring? Where did you go learn how to fly? What equipment did you get? Where did you start?
I had a really terrible start into paramotoring. So where I was living at the time, there was no school nearby. So I had to travel at least 7 hours to just get to anywhere that would train me. It was not at a time where you can go to a school and they will give you equipment. It's like you had to buy everything.
Oh, okay.
So you had to buy your wing, buy your motor, pay some dude to train you.
Yeah.
And then you had to go train with it. I had an awful time getting into it. Because first off, you had to come up with the money, which was hard to do.
Right.
And I didn't have a lot of time that I could just take away from work,
Right.
because most of us have to deal with vacation time. Like I can't just take, 2.5 weeks or whatever to go down to Aviator, get all my training, and then be like, by the way, now you don't get a family vacation for the year.
Right.
Because you went and did paramotor training.
You burned it up.
So I wanted to do it on weekends when I had time available.
Yeah.
So that was a mistake being so far away from the school that I was at.
Right.
You really want to be close to a school if you're doing that.
Okay.
So I paid a guy who's fortunately not in business anymore. It was a terrible experience.
Yeah. Not naming names.
Well, he's not even in the industry anymore,
Okay.
so that's all fine. But got the equipment.
Yeah.
My wing came in, and the paramotor was like, several weeks out.
What wing did you get?
It was a Mac Para Charger. I think it was a 25.
People are still flying those.
People are still flying them.
Yeah.
And a mini plane.
Okay.
It was a mini plane with a Moster 185.
Yeah.
It was actually when mini plane like just came out with the 185 frame.
Yeah.
So we got that. The motor didn't come in, so we were practicing kiting for a little bit.
Yeah.
But then it would be like, well, the weather's not good, so why don't you go drive 7 hours back to your house? Okay. So we did that for like weeks.
Yeah.
Where I would wait for the weather window to be okay, or at least to look okay.
Right.
Drive, sleep in my car the night before, go to the airport, train, or try to train,
Right.
do a little bit of kiting, and there was no curriculum. It wasn't like, all right, we're going to take out the PPG Bible and we're going to go through this.
Right.
It was like, what questions you got for me?
Okay,
Okay,
I don't
no.
know the right
I'm here so
questions.
you.
Yeah.
I don't even know what to ask you
Right, yeah.
right now. Like, I've obviously done some research,
Right.
but why don't you tell me stuff and then I will come up with questions later? I'm like, oh, well, what do you want to know? That's a bad way to go about this.
Yeah.
So it was a really rough start, and it was, and like, he had a hangar full of airplanes, and he was really interested in airplanes. So he would show me his airplanes and be like,
This is
like,
what I'm here for.
man, you're gonna be here another year, and you're gonna want to fly these.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, I just paid you like $12,000. I kind of want you to be excited about the thing I paid you for.
Yeah, exactly.
So we did that for weeks, and then the motor finally came in, and I still have no flight time. But he didn't put it together. So I'm like, okay, are we gonna put it together? Well, no, but you come by train. So we go by, and the paramotor's not together
Yeah.
because it was shipped from overseas. So we do some more kiting, and I finally get my first flight on his mini plane with a top 80, and it was fine. It was like a 20-minute flight, kind of hovered around the
How
airport.
long had you been training at this point before you took your first flight?
Probably 2 months.
Okay. Wow. Dang.
So I finally got the first flight in. Came in for a landing, landed in a patch of mud, so got filthy. I did land on my feet, I didn't slip.
Okay, well,
But
that's
landed
good.
in a patch of mud, packed up, and then it was like, okay, yeah, we'll get the motor together, and next time you're gonna fly on your motor, because the weather's not gonna be good tomorrow.
Right.
Okay. So then some more weeks go by. And in the meantime, I have planned this big van life road trip with
Yeah.
me and my wife. I'm like, I want that paramotor.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to paramotor places on this road trip, and I have one 20-minute flight behind me and like literally no airtime.
Yeah. Did you experience any difficulties through training? Like, do you feel as though you understood kiting well enough at this
No,
point?
it was painfully easy because conditions were perfect and I never got to be challenged.
Oh, okay.
So it was like we would kite a couple times,
Yeah.
and then he'd be like, nah, you're fine.
Do you think that there's an advantage of learning in areas that aren't necessarily coastal regions that have that perfect breeze?
I have so many forward launches because I don't tend to fly in windy conditions because I don't do a lot of coastal flying.
Sure.
So like most of my launches are forward launches.
Right.
Like I have a really detailed like flight log of what I've flown, and
Yeah.
I dictate whether I've done a reverse launch or a forward launch. And it's like hundreds and hundreds of forward launches. And I have like 30 reverse launches because like, we never do it.
Yeah, that's probably more than I have. I mean, I probably have 7 reverse launches.
And all of my reverse launches are like 6 launches on the same day.
Right.
Because, oh, it's windy, let me practice reverse launching. And I'll just keep doing it over and over again.
Right.
It's like, oh, cool, I got, 6 or 8 launches in a day.
Yeah.
But it's like 4 or 5 days worth of launches.
I think
it's not a lot.
I think that there's pros and cons to forward launching and reverse launching. Forward launching, I think, opens up doors for you to be able to launch in more complicated places that, especially to access skies that are predictably calm, since there's not very much activity going on if there is no wind. However, the downside, the drawback to it is that when you don't do a reverse, you don't have an opportunity to check the lines as they're coming up, because
Why would you do that?
Well,
I don't see any reason to check the lines.
just send it or bend it. Although I did bend it once. But anyways, the 20-minute flight, is that all you had before you?
All I had. So
Wow.
motor gets built, all is good, all is well, but
Yeah.
weather windows aren't opening up for training.
Sure.
And I have this impending trip coming up that like,
Right.
okay, I'm giving you one more chance.
Yeah.
We are going to train on this weekend that the weather's looking good. And if not, I'm
beat the
coming up and I'm taking all of my stuff out of your your hangar.
Yeah.
Because I need to go find someone else who can train me.
Right.
So training window didn't look good, and I was prepared to like take an extra week off
Right.
just to get this thing done at that point. So weather window doesn't open up. It's like, all right, I'm on my way. I'm coming to get all my stuff.
Like a bad relationship. You're like, I'm getting all my things. I'm done.
I'm getting all my things. We're done. We are breaking this off. And so I have a little bit of kiting time and one motor launch.
Probably fine.
All right. And so I went and kited some more, and I got some of my own first flights, or my first flights on my own at home.
You mean you were training yourself?
I had to self-train at that point. What other choice did I have at the moment?
Yeah, you've already burnt your money.
Other than all the smart choices that I should have made.
Well, I don't know. I think that it may not be the popular opinion, but I think that some individuals are perfectly capable of teaching themselves how to fly because they're so methodical in how they go about it. If you're not the person who can teach yourself, you shouldn't teach yourself. You have to be of the mindset where you accept that you don't know this thing that can totally kill you. But if you do have that and you have like an abundance of fear, you approach things very cautiously and you'll take baby steps. And that makes for really, some of the best pilots I know taught themselves. So I assume that when you did get home with all your gear, you probably didn't just send it right away and try all these new things. How did you go about it at that point?
I had been practicing kiting, on and off a little bit before that.
Yeah.
The problem is I know that if no one is there to tell me that I'm not establishing bad habits, I'm not going to know, and it's going to inflate.
What's an example of a bad habit?
Having a feel for when to actually hit the gas, rev up the engine, and start to take off.
Okay.
Like that's very much, you can do it pretty fast now.
Yeah.
Or I mean, we can do it pretty fast now. But when you're starting out, you tend to run a lot more than you do when you get experience because you don't have that feel for, yeah, wing is stable, we're good.
Right.
So
I'm
that's
I'm like a glider 70% up, and then I'm already on power, like bringing it up the rest of the way, feeling the brakes, to check the glider, make sure it doesn't overshoot. But
that's
that way,
feeling the brakes.
yeah.
I didn't know that you should just give it a little bit of brake tension. I was arms up the entire way early on, because no one had told me that, like, yeah, when you get that thing stable and you're ready to hit the gas, give it a little bit of pressure. No one ever told me that, so I was not doing that. So I was completely arms up, giving it the gas, and that's why my launches took forever when I was starting out.
Because you didn't apply the pressure to give you the increase in lift to get off the ground?
Didn't apply any pressure.
Okay, wow. Yeah, that sucks.
Wouldn't that be a great habit that an instructor could have told you about?
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder if within your tinkering mind, or you're trying to figure out the best way to do things, if throughout this process, if you're kind of developing your own training program, for example, like takeoff, run forward, glider comes up, roll onto power, check the glider, and once you have that speed, kind of like in a commercial aircraft, it's like, speed 100 miles per hour, rotate, like you kind of have it all figured out in your brain. Same thing with a paramotor.
Well, not only that, but positioning of your motor.
Right.
Because me and everybody else, when we're starting out, if nobody tells us that you should lean back because you don't realize it, but you're hunched forward, and your motor is shooting into the air.
Pushing you down.
And pushing you down.
Right, the opposite way you want to go.
You don't know that unless somebody is looking at you and saying, hey, by the way,
you suck.
When you're actually doing that, lean back a little bit. Yeah. Like, there's a lot of those little things that, if no one's telling you how to do it, like, you might establish those bad habits.
For sure.
So that was a challenge for me, and it wasn't a great start. So I had a throttle issue early on, because the professional who put my motor together routed the throttle cable, which was just a basic mini plane throttle. The throttle cable housing was actually touching the motor. So all the heat from that motor was dumping into the throttle cable. So when I was in the air flying, I did a longer flight, and that heat built up, and it actually melted the housing, and it locked my throttle, giving me cruise control. But so I'm on the gas, and then I go over some trees, and I'm like, all right, we're getting to the airport, let's let it off.
Nope.
Oh, that's stuck. That's stuck in there. All right, well, I'm gonna get over to where I think I'm gonna land before I attempt to kill the engine. So I'm like going over, just gaining altitude, and I'm like, I hope this kill switch works.
Yeah.
Because I don't have a lot of secondary options.
Yeah, you just keep climbing and climbing until you.
Because another thing that wasn't really taught to me is, hey, what do you do if your kill switch doesn't work? Like, well, I don't know at the time.
Yeah.
Well, I learned that stuff later.
Yeah.
But I didn't know then. It's like, I guess I'll land with the motor on. So fortunately, the kill switch did work.
Yeah.
But I circled over where I was going to land, had a nice long landing pattern.
Yeah.
Finally landed, and then look at that, my throttle cable's melted.
Wow. So
but I got to experience cruise control for the first time.
A cruise control that was unintentional.
It was very unintentional.
So what do you do if your kill switch doesn't work in a scenario like that? How would you have turned off your paramotor knowing what you know today?
So knowing what I know today, I would have had a chance to practice reaching and seeing if I can pull the spark plug, which would be easy. You could also cover up your airbox, which I have not tried to do that in flight. It seems like a very awkward, difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
It just seems like you're reaching around near a propeller. It seems kind of difficult.
I've had it happen to me unintentionally where my hoodie, it was like this non-occlusive windbreaker, and the hoodie went back and blocked the airbox. So then the motor turned off.
Well, glad it blocked the airbox and didn't get caught in the prop.
Yeah.
I will not fly with hoods.
Yeah.
And I tell people, don't fly with a hood just in case.
Do as Pierce says, not as Anthony does.
But if your motor, if it has a priming bulb, which mine did not,
Yeah.
you could flood the engine as
Okay.
well,
Yeah.
which is my current method of choice because it's very easy to reach that on my current paramotor.
I assume this hasn't happened to you since?
No, I had the opposite problem where I run out of gas.
Yeah,
I never
okay.
have too much gas.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, my issue is I run out.
Did this start sparking some ideas for creating a
No,
throttle?
it sparked a lot of anger and frustration, more than ideas.
Okay, so I'm curious. So you were
So we went on our road trip and had a great time. I think I only did 3, maybe 4 flights on our first road trip. It was great. I mean, we flew in Sedona, and Moab.
okay.
And it's like great, amazing places to fly. But I didn't have a lot of flight experience.
Yeah.
So I wasn't prepared to like do a lot of low proximity flying near some of these amazing structures.
Right.
I just wasn't experienced enough at the time.
Right.
Yeah, another thing would have been worth knowing is rotor and where to and not to fly. Great thing for an
Yeah.
instructor to tell you.
Well, that's what has prevented me from flying in these incredible locations is the fear of just not knowing how the air flows around these majestic, like Monument Valley, for example. That'd be great, but wouldn't you want to get up close to these cliff sides but
And most days that you can fly, still you might not want to be close to that. So it's
Right.
like you need good flying conditions and good proximity flying conditions. So it's like to know what you can and can't do and where you want to be upwind from a lot of these obstacles.
Right.
Like I didn't really know that. I knew of rotor, but I didn't really know how you avoid it at the time. It wasn't until later when I got back home, I got to practice more. I got to read the PPG Bible. I watched a lot more research videos, and again, some airspace videos on what areas to avoid and not to
Right.
go. Not to go. Like I didn't know any of that.
Right.
So that was helpful to learn afterwards.
Right.
And I also do think the PPG Bible, read that after training, not before, because everything makes a lot more sense
Yeah.
after you've already kind of done it than
Yeah.
if you were coming at it from no experience.
Yeah.
You're going to be like, that looks like a lot of lines on the paramotor.
But I can also understand how people would be like really excited like I was before I went to training. I got the PPG Bible and I just read through it. And granted, I didn't really understand all of these things, but then I read it again afterwards.
And it made more sense the second time, right?
Of course, it made a lot more sense. So during this epic road trip, were there any scary instances? Did you experience any of this rotor turbulence?
No, because I kept a really safe distance from any obstacle.
Right.
Because I knew enough to know that I wasn't ready to do any of that low flying
Right.
near some of these things. So I kept a good distance from anything that could do me damage.
Did you nail all of your landings?
I did.
Oh, wow.
I landed all my takeoffs and all my landings on that first
Just
road
a
trip.
pro from the start.
Not even close.
Any failed launches?
Not on the road trips, no.
Dang, man.
Now, before the road trips,
Yeah.
plenty of failed launches.
Right.
Because I didn't do a lot of kiting with the motor on my back because I didn't have a motor.
Right.
But I slipped, cracked my frame.
Is that the frame you showed me?
That's the frame I showed you. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But I slipped and cracked my frame. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to get a new frame. I ended up going to some guys in North Carolina, AirX PPG. They're really good guys.
Okay.
He helped me repair the entire motor, get everything back up to snuff. He had some local welder come in and weld everything.
Yeah.
Got the motor back up, and he gave me like a quick on-the-spot lesson of like, look, show me your launch
Yeah.
real quick. Show me how you're doing. I'm going to give you some pointers before you go on this trip where you're gonna see some more difficult high altitude launches.
Right.
Because remember, we're almost at sea level.
Yeah.
So we were going up and doing launches, very high altitudes.
Right.
So it was way different.
Do you think that those experiences from the road trip made you better by the time that you did get home?
Yes, and I was probably more excited to fly when I got home because I got to take time to learn and not worry about trying to make like an epic sightseeing flight. Because you go to Moab and it's like, I want to go and I want to see stuff.
Yeah.
Now that all that like pressure is off to make use of this road trip,
Right.
I can really like nail down my launches and my landings and practice my spot landings and really get to know the motor. And that's actually when I started to think about the throttle and the cruise control aspect of it. Because at this time, I had never flown with anybody. I'd only done solo flying. So we don't do a lot of like social things. If you're flying by yourself, you tend to go a good distance. Like I want to go see this spot, so I'll take off here, I'll make this journey, and I'll go, you want to fly over your house, but your house is 20 miles away.
Right.
So you figure out how to get home and see some random quarries along the way.
Right.
That's where I started to do some longer flying.
Yeah.
It's like, it would be nice if I had some cruise control.
Right.
So I would, you look and you see the different throttles and some retrofits people do where they have like the thumb screw that locks the throttle in place.
Yeah.
And it's like, it works. But I had envisioned something that I wanted to get out of quickly.
Yeah.
Because if you have one of those thumb screw cruise controls, but you want to get out of it, it's like, all right, well, now I got to unscrew it, or am I going to tighten it too much?
Or you'll have to force it.
Yeah. Or am I going to not make it tight enough?
Right.
And then have it slowly back out over time. Like it didn't seem like the best, off the shelf option.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I really want something that I can set, and I want to be able to disconnect it quickly.
Yeah.
So that's where the idea started to come from. And then it was actually at a gas pump that I see how the gas pump latch
Oh yeah.
disconnects.
I didn't think about that.
And
It
I'm
is
like-
similar. You click it and it stops.
and it disconnects.
Yeah.
I'm like, I bet something like that could work. But I didn't have money to make this or start.
Well, what were you doing at the time?
So at the time, I was working for Heckler & Koch, and I was a weapon designer for them before I was at Daniel Defense.
Yeah.
And that's actually when I started to fly paramotors. So I was doing weapon development at that time. And I'm like, I know the plastics world, I know the mechanical world. Like this,
Yeah.
this is all something I can do.
Is that how you gained entry? Was that your first mechanical engineering job?
No, so out of school, I got a job at Dentsply Sirona. That's where I got like my heavy CAD use background, the product development side of it, how to do injection molding.
Injection molding, that's something that you use with the throttle. How do you create an injection molded part?
You have some empty cavity
Right.
that you inject hot plastic into.
Okay.
It hardens, then the shell has to come apart, and then you get your part at the end. Every component of an injection molded piece is tens of thousands of dollars.
No
Like every
way.
component that needs a
Wow.
mold. That's why you see a lot of people who, when they do mold, they'll have several cavities in
Yeah.
one mold. Because while I'm
Okay.
paying for the tool, so I want to get several parts out of one tool.
Right.
In fact, the throttle, a lot of the components do come several pieces out of one mold.
Dang.
Yeah,
That's crazy. So you really don't want to screw up this mold.
right.
Let me take a guess. You create the part and then the mold is the easy part, or no?
And it's not necessarily the easy part. You need to make, the part comes first, because the
Okay.
part's going to drive what the mold is, what kind of mold that you need. So the part always comes first.
Yeah.
But in the part, you have to have certain concessions to make it moldable. 3D printing, for example.
Yeah.
You can do complicated geometry on a 3D printed part that you can't do with like a machined component or like an injection molded component or an extruded component. Each manufacturing process has its benefits and its trade-offs.
Injection molding looks the best.
Injection molding makes really, really nice parts.
Yeah.
And they are cheaper at scale.
Okay.
So once you make the mold, making 100 parts versus making 1,000 parts, like the time to make them isn't much different.
Okay.
It takes more time to set up the mold
Right.
than it will be to mold the parts.
Okay.
So when you do mold, you don't want to make 10 parts, because it's going to take half a day to set up the mold, get it all dialed in, and then make those 10 parts. It's like you want to make 1,000 parts at a time.
Right.
And bigger factories like, no, we want to make 20,000 at a time.
I assume there's a lot of different options for what type of plastic gets injected into it.
So the bigger thing with the plastics is the shrink rate, because everything, most things get, they shrink when they
cool down, yeah.
Plastics is one thing. Metal injection molding is even worse.
Right.
Because those vary so much more as far as how much they shrink.
Your throttle used the injection molding process
Yes.
to create your parts, which contributes to it looking like a very professional product.
Thank you. I hope to be professional.
Well, paramotoring is a relatively small industry, especially when compared to like general aviation, where you can expect to find injection molded parts. Once you had figured out, oh, there's something there with that gas pump, what was the next step?
So the next step was just thinking about working for yourself. So I need to come up with some way that I can make money based on the skills that I've made over the years. How can I make money working for myself?
Right.
Because I can do like freelance design engineering, but that's just another job.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to get out on my own and do something.
Right.
I'm like, you could do something in the firearms industry. I'm already in the industry, but it's a very competitive industry. It's difficult for somebody with a very small operation to make a big difference in the firearms industry.
Especially when you don't have massive funds available to
Well,
you.
you're competing with these $100 million companies.
Like Remington and Smith & Wesson and
yeah, and SIG.
SIG, yeah.
And anything I do at home is going to be way more expensive than a company that can do it at scale.
Right.
Because these companies, they can have a whole assembly line dedicated to one product that's manned by 20 people. And it's just a turnkey operation. Like they're just cranking out products by the minute.
Right.
Whereas what could I do? I can build a couple things in a day. So it's like, I'm probably not gonna do anything in the firearms world. What about this paramotoring thing that I do? I'm like, maybe there's something there. And you look at the throttles and you think, there's not a lot of options out here for throttles. What if I made a throttle? I told my wife, I think I'm gonna design a paramotor throttle. And she's like, all right, that's cool.
Yeah.
And little did we know that that little conversation would blow up into all of this.
Yeah.
I had SolidWorks at home.
And SolidWorks is?
SolidWorks is a CAD design software. There's a lot. There's Autodesk, there's Fusion 360, there's CATIA, NX. There's a lot of different CAD programs that you could use. SolidWorks is just one that I have used professionally.
Okay.
So I had a home license for it. So, at the time, I actually had a student license.
Right.
Because if you were former military, you can get a student edition of SolidWorks for $20 a year.
Oh, wow.
Versus the $5,000 that the professional seat costs.
Holy cow.
So I had the student edition of SolidWorks.
Yeah.
I start to do the design. The latch mechanism that would actually disconnect the throttle, that was pretty easy to come up with because it's just, it'll click in position. Having a latch with a little ledge that it could sit on, that locks it in position, you press the throttle and the thing would disconnect.
Like the gas pump.
Like the gas pump. But the problem is that step. So your motor and my motor and the 5 different wings that you might fly and everybody else and the different elevations that you fly at, they're all gonna have a cruise RPM in a different spot.
Right.
So I can't just mold a ledge into a piece of plastic and expect that that's where your level flight's gonna be.
Yeah.
So I needed some level of adjustment to it.
Yeah.
So I knew I needed to adjust where the throttle locks in position. So I came up with different mechanisms that would work.
We're not working with, turboprop planes with Garmin navigation and autopilot where you just set the altitude and bam, it's right there.
Right.
We're talking about carbureted 2-stroke engines that will take some adjusting. Yeah.
Yeah, but that adjustment's kind of cool.
Yeah.
In fact, when it's in position, you can adjust it up to give yourself more, and you could adjust it down and give yourself less thrust. Well, what if I turn that concession that I had to make anyway, what if I turn that into a feature? So that's where the knob on the throttle became very large. I'm like, now I have a big adjustment wheel. And so now I turned what I needed for general cruise control into a feature that now you can adjust it.
Yeah.
And no matter where you have it set, the disconnect is still the same. You just blip the throttle and the thing comes disconnected.
When you're flying along, it's just you don't even have to look at it. You can just feel it right there. You've got the little what would you call those little grooves?
The little detents.
The detents
Yep.
on it make it, and it gives it such a tactile feel when you're turning it. It
So
feels great.
originally, I just had a wheel that would turn, but I need that wheel to stop turning. Like any
Okay.
vibration from the motor, I don't want that wheel to work itself, up or down. So I wanted to put some sort of a ball detent in the throttle housing that would lock that knob in position so it just wouldn't move.
Right.
That clicking sensation is really nice because when you're on the ground, you can actually hear the click. When you're in the air, you can't hear the click, but you
Yeah.
can feel it. So when you're actually going and adjusting your cruise control, you can
Right.
feel it in your hand that it is clicking.
Yeah. At this point, you understand the mechanics behind how this primary function of the throttle is going to work.
Yep.
But you obviously still had a lot of other things to figure out.
One of the things in all of my other jobs is we always have some sort of a user feedback. So whether it's guns, you give it to some people, they shoot them, they tell you what they don't like about it.
Yeah.
And gun industry people are the best at telling you what they hate about your product. They're the best at it.
Yeah, they
So
don't,
you
they
give
don't
them a sound,
sugarcoat
and they're
it.
like, I hate this, I hate this, I hate that,
Yeah.
and that. So I'm like, I need that in this throttle. And that's good in these early stages because you can change things.
Right.
We'll go back a little bit in the past. So I used to be really into whitewater kayaking. It's what I did
cool.
in college. And whitewater kayaking, the community, is very similar to paramotors, where you have these meetups and you all go down the river, and then that night, everybody who you went down the river with friend requests you on Facebook.
Yeah.
So you end up with all of these friends that you have no clue where you met them from,
Yeah.
but you're just packed with these whitewater kayaking friends.
Right.
So I had this friend, Stephen Fay, and me and him kayaked some river at some point,
Right.
but neither of us can remember where we actually met.
Yeah.
And he was getting into paramotoring separate from me at the same time.
Oh, wow.
And I was Facebook friends with him.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like, I need to reach out to Stephen.
Yeah.
So he had become an instructor down at Aviator.
Okay.
And I'm like, that's that's also making me feel terrible that like you're this big instructor and we start at the same time. And I'm like, I have no training,
Yeah,
nothing. And this guy's already an instructor. And I'm like, hey, you gonna be at Aviator this week? So I go and I see Steven. And I'm like, hey, what paramotor throttle do you fly? He's like, I have this one, but I really hate all of them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I got something to show you.
Yeah, yeah.
So I had the third prototype that you saw. Run a B-roll clip of that one now.
Yeah.
But the horrendous looking throttle.
Yeah.
And so I show him this throttle, and he's like, I would buy that right now.
Oh, really?
And so all the instructors at the Denellen Aviator.
That must have like set you on fire. Like,
No, it
hell
made me
yeah.
really mad because it looks horrendously ugly. I'm like, no.
Yeah,
The
but
real one's gonna be better.
The concept, knowing that the proof of concept.
Yeah, the proof of concept was there, but it's like, but this is a really ugly throttle. Like, I'm gonna make it
Yeah,
look
just
better.
wait, just wait till you see the actual finished product.
They gave me feedback, but none of it was that useful.
So it wasn't like the firearm
No,
industry.
they were like, this is great. Like, it was encouraging, but none of it was criticism.
That's what you want.
Right. It was nice, and it made the
Say,
conversation
"Hurt
easy.
my feelings.
Like, I want you to rip the thing apart.
Yeah.
But like, nobody gave me really good criticism about it until it launched.
Well, what were people saying?
So let's pause that because we'll get into that after
Okay.
launch. So I kept making iterations of the throttle. And at this point, I had the mechanics of the inside and I knew how it was going to be assembled, but now I need to make it pretty. And that's the fun part of product development, like figuring out the mechanisms and then saying, okay, I know what the main components are going to look like. Now I have to make it look cool.
Yeah.
So that's where the sculpting comes in, and you get to make like very organic shapes on it.
Yeah.
And you get to see how one piece flows into another.
Right.
And you just get to make it look good. And that's really fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So then I started to get better high-end 3D prints made. So at this time, Harley with the 50X Challenge, he was doing his, it might have been his second record, but his coast-to-coast trip where he was going from California to Florida.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I bet he could use this throttle because it has cruise control,
Right.
and this is the perfect opportunity to test it.
Right.
So I emailed Harley, and it went straight to spam, so we never saw it. It was like months go by. And then finally he's like, dude, this went to my spam folder. I absolutely want to fly this.
Yeah.
And he absolutely loved it.
So the biggest benefit from Harley flying this was its initial exposure, because he was able to share that this is the throttle I'm flying coast to coast with. Wow.
Yeah, and he showed it, and he actually made it coast to coast with that throttle, which was amazing. And then Mark Honeycutt is another one who I reached out to a lot of the YouTube guys, except for you.
Jeez, man.
You know what's funny? You were actually on my list of
D-list celebrity. I won't hold it against you.
But Mark Honeycutt, he was like, yeah, I'll try that. That looks cool.
And it still wasn't available.
It still wasn't available for sale.
You couldn't pre-order it at this? You couldn't even pre-order it?
I refuse to do pre-orders for anything I ever make. I didn't want something to go wrong last minute and go, oops, I have to delay it by 5 months. Because a lot of things can go wrong last minute. And then you're not gonna have anything to sell. And it's like, oh no, you have 100 people that gave you money and you have nothing to give them. The only thing I did was I made a wait list that people could sign up for, but I wouldn't take anyone's money because so much can go wrong right before launch. You know, I made my company, I made the website, but I didn't really put much on the website because I don't have anything to sell. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna make an Instagram page. So I just started to post different paramotor videos, get, you know, a couple hundred followers, and then I can show off that, like, hey, look, we're making this throttle. And then we did, like, you know, the 1 week countdown to throttles will be available. So I'm building throttles in the shop.
Were all the parts that were coming in, like the injection molds, were they just as you had hoped they would be?
No, they never are. The first batch that comes in, you generally expect a little bit of rework to be done. So I had them go in and rework some of those holes just to get the screws to fit much better.
But you didn't have to pay for an entirely new mold.
No, I had to pay for them to go in and revise their current molds.
Right, but it's not like producing a brand new mold.
Right, they just had to go and do a slight modification to the mold.
So you are in the other shop, starting to put all of these things together.
Yep.
Preparing for the launch to begin.
Yep.
How did launch go?
Launch went great. We had a little less than 200 throttles. I wanted 200 throttles to be built and ready to go for launch, but I didn't quite get to 200. But I had an exact launch date because I was going on, what is it, Paragliding Talk, that podcast.
With Robert Michaels, yeah.
Robert Michaels' podcast, the night of the product launch.
Wow.
So if you do go back and rewatch that podcast, my mind is not on the podcast at all because I'm looking at the analytics of what's going on right now while I'm on this podcast. I'm always like, And so we're sitting in the office, mark everything is in stock, see what happens. A couple seconds go by, order came in.
The first one.
We sold something like 48 throttles.
What was the opening price for one of these?
Opening price was pull starts are $230. The E-starts were $250, and then I also had the Nitro and Tornado configuration, which was $270. Those were the only products that I had on the website, and we sold something like 45 products on the first night. And we continued to sell, high numbers day after day after day.
Wow.
But within like the first 5 minutes, I think we sold like 15 throttles.
Wow.
So we're like, wow, people are watching this.
Yeah.
And the paramotor industry is full of gear junkies. So you get the newest tech, the newest something, like people are watching, which I come to realize later. But I didn't realize there were that many eyes on my product at the time.
So how quickly were you able to start shipping?
We wanted to ship everything the next day, and we were so overwhelmed with orders that we couldn't get everything shipped the next day.
Because it exceeded your expectations.
Exceeded the expectations. So it was the next day into Saturday that we were packing and shipping throttles.
But eventually these throttles arrived to these people, and you had alluded to earlier that this is when you started to get critical feedback.
Yes. The first complaint was that they're too short. So soon after launch, we came out with the 51-inch and the 55-inch throttles. Usually the 51-inch is what the left-handed people tend to fly with. Some of the paramotor frames, like you flew a gravity paramotor, that had like the tank up real high, and you had to like serpentine around the tank. So that ate up a lot of throttle space. And then we started to get complaints about the grip being hard to switch from left to right hand, which I agree with, it was, but I thought most people were already going to be left-handed.
Right.
When an order comes in, I would put the strap on the corresponding side and then ship the throttle out that way. And then the other one was the kill switch and the e-start. Both the buttons that we use, they're domed at the top, so they stick out a little bit. So people were inadvertently shutting off the engine with the kill switch. Not all paramotors with e-starts have a master kill switch, which you come to learn later. They should, but not all e-starts have that master kill switch. So people were accidentally hitting the starter button because it sticks out a little bit from the side. Both of those items were harder to address quickly because I need to make new parts for that. Over time, we noticed that the original first generation grips got marred up pretty easily. So the grip is made with an extrusion tool. So the foam itself gets like extruded out into a tube.
Oh.
And then that tube gets cut and the edges rounded on it. But I was getting inconsistent like compression against the throttle handle. So the grip itself would sometimes move independently of the rest of the throttle.
So you could like spin it?
You could spin it.
Okay.
Like the strap wouldn't spin,
Right.
but the grip underneath of it would.
Okay.
And especially as they started to get older and more abused, like that would just get worse and worse.
Right.
So I knew we needed to address that. So we were actually, we were pushing a baby stroller, and like the grip that was on this stroller, like that is a high quality, like heavy density foam grip. I need to find out what this material is, and I need to put that on the throttles.
Graco? Hello? What material are you using? It's funny because it started kind of like at this fuel pump where you have this idea of being able to quickly release the lever, and then another idea comes from the baby stroller.
Yeah.
So it's like these things that you interact with. What do they say? If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the feel of that handle is like, that's exactly what I want. I want this heavy density foam that doesn't mar very easily.
Yeah.
It doesn't stick to your hand.
Right,
Like
right,
so.
right.
So I did actually talk to the extrusion house that makes similar products.
And they
Again,
they actually were able to give you the answer?
they're the ones who do the grips for me now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, new client calling.
New client. So yeah, they actually do the grips for me now.
Any issues with this new grip? And that's the grip that we have today on off-grid throttles.
From the business standpoint, having a left and right configuration is a huge pain. And so I wanted the grip module to be very easily swapped from left to right hand.
Okay.
And I didn't want to do it in the factory at all. I call this a factory, it's a workshop.
Oh,
But
I mean,
I didn't want them left and right configured at all. So I wanted to take that option off of the website. You just buy a throttle.
It's a universal.
You push it to whatever side that you
Right.
want, and you lock it in position. Finding inspiration. Mountain bike grips. I was also very into mountain biking back in the day.
Yeah.
Mountain bike grips have usually a locking piece on both sides of your grip with like a plastic sleeve that goes on the inside. The sleeve will go over your bike handle, and then you'll have these screws that'll actually tighten down and grip it in place. And then they're rock solid. Like that's what I want. I want something that I can easily put on and off, switch from left to right, tighten it down, and then it'll stay rock solid. So I came up with this new extrusion tool that would make a hard plastic insert that would hold your strap in position with these little nubs that would come out, and then you'll have a locking piece on both the lower and the top portion of the grip. How I set them from the shop is I put the strap right in the middle of your throttle, so it's not set up for left or right-handed people. So you have to push it to one side or the other.
Right.
And it's gonna come on a little bit loose. So you don't need to loosen anything. You just grab the grip, push it to one side, and then you'll tighten the screws on it.
Right.
And I give you the little Allen key to tighten it as well.
Hey, that works out.
So now I don't have to have a left and right configuration.
Yeah.
And now I can actually pre-package everything, sit it on the shelf, ready to ship, and that'll save me a lot of time. When an order comes in, I can just send it out the door.
Yeah.
Or like what I have going on now, there's a local like pack and ship store. They actually warehouse a small quantity of my throttles. So if I'm out in the middle of the day and I get an order, I can send them the order, and they already have it in their inventory ready to go, shipped from their location.
And does this person happen to be a neighbor?
He is my next door neighbor. My next door neighbor happens to own the shipping store.
Wow, that worked out
And it worked
well.
out pretty well.
So does that bring us up to where the off-grid aviation throttle is today?
Yes, though we skipped the kill switch and the e-start. People were accidentally hitting.
Uh-huh.
So I made a shield, the top locking piece for the kill switch. It's going to come with a low profile locking piece that exposes your whole kill switch just as the throttle came before. But in the spare parts kit with all of like your mounting hardware, there's going to be an extended top locking piece. So if you want a little guard that'll keep your kill switch from being accidentally pressed, you already have the piece. You just need to pull off the low profile one, put the extended one on, and now you have a little kill switch cover that'll keep you from accidentally bumping it. The e-start button, same thing, though these will come pre-installed on the e-start buttons, or the e-start throttles, and it'll just prevent you from accidentally hitting your e-start. So that brings us to where the throttle is today.
Holy cow, hearing all of this makes me think that there's a lot more that goes into inventing any product. I wonder, what would your advice be to anybody who wants to get into tinkering, creating something, improving upon something?
If you want to do product development stuff, you can do a lot more with what you already have than worry about getting some other barrier of entry. So like, for example, like the CAD software. I use SolidWorks because I've used it professionally. You don't need a $5,000 SolidWorks license. You can get Fusion 360 for like a couple $100, and you can use it professionally and get yourself designing parts. If you want to get some parts that you think you might need to machine, don't worry about buying a machine until you have parts to feed the machine. So like invent the part before you invest in the machine, but a lot of people get hung up on like, oh, I want to make, some component, but I don't have the tooling to make it. Well, it's like, well, did you finish designing the part that you want to make? No, I didn't even begin because I don't have a mill. It's like, don't worry about getting a mill. Worry about getting the part to mill before you invest all this money into a mill that might sit there for no reason. Like, you can do so much with what you already have. Like, you don't need anything proper to start. Like, work your way up to a barrier rather than thinking you have it already.
Right.
Like, you could do a lot more with what you already have.
Yeah, it seems like it's important to keep the ball moving, because I assume a lot of people who want to do something similar like this, it just seems like that people would reach these roadblocks of moments of discouragement rather than just continuing.
Right. And you don't want to settle on a product that isn't good. But if you want something to be completely perfect, you will never be done. Because even like our throttle, we've gone through iterations and small improvements over time with that throttle. But if I needed it to be perfect, but that perfect before launch, I didn't even think some of the problems that we were facing after launch were gonna be problems. So I didn't even know that these were things I'm gonna have to fix. So you gotta get started with something.
Right.
And that's why I really wanted user feedback. Like, I don't care what you like about it. Tell me what you hate about it, because I need to know what I need to fix.
It's actionable as opposed to, oh, thanks for telling me you love it. The throttles aren't very difficult to install, even for a simpleton like myself. But you would think that manufacturers would want to install the world's greatest paramotor throttle just right there in their manufacturing setup.
Most of the paramotor manufacturers will offer the off-grid as an improvement, like as an upcharge.
Yeah.
So a lot of them are doing that now.
Who are some of the manufacturers of paramotors that currently offer off-grid throttles?
Just about all the major players are doing it right now. Like Kanguk, they sell off-grid throttles. Like True North, they're selling the off-grid throttles. Parajet's an option to buy the off-grid throttles. Fly Products, you can buy the off-grid throttles. All of the main ones that you could think of, they're using our throttle.
You don't get as much of a profit if somebody purchases it from the paramotor manufacturer. But would you still advise somebody who's purchasing a new paramotor to just go ahead and get it from them?
It's whatever makes the most sense to them.
Right.
If they're doing paramotor maintenance, that's a great time to put a new throttle on.
Okay.
If you just bought your paramotor and you're new to the sport and you aren't really flying, you're not that experienced in flying yet, don't
Right.
get a new throttle. If you are looking to buy a new paramotor, I obviously want people to buy our throttle because it's
Yeah.
what we sell.
Right.
If you can get a paramotor with a throttle already installed, just save yourself the headache and get it installed already.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
One of the local guys here, he flies a Parajet, and he bought a paramotor with our throttle on it before we even met.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, man, that throttle took a weird trip around the world because it got built in Rincon, got shipped over to the UK at Parajet. They installed it on their paramotor. Then Parajet shipped it to the US importer, who then shipped it to you here in Rincon, next to where the throttle was already built. So that one took a weird route around the world.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's interesting. This has been one hell of an experience, and getting to learn all of the intricacies that go into designing not just a product, but an exceptional product has been really exciting. And I'm excited because in just a moment, I'm going to be building an off-grid aviation classic cruise control throttle.
Yep.
That I'll get to take home with me. And I'll be putting it on my paramotor. Hopefully that's not a bad thing, because I'm touching it.
Yep.
It's just cursed from the beginning. I love everything that you do. You're a fantastic human being, a veteran as well, and why not support an incredible product that's manufactured by a really good person right here in the United States? So really, thank you for having me out.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming out.
And I hope that people go over to offgridaviation.com to check it out and learn more about it. And if you are planning on getting a paramotor, or it may just be that time to upgrade your throttle from whatever it is that you have, certainly look into the off-grid classic or light version of their throttles. Thank you everybody for taking the time to watch this video. Pierce, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much.
All right, we'll see you guys in the next one.